So it's that time once again. We're 5 days away from the season starting, Platchat, ATP, and more Overwatch League creators have gotten their tier lists out there, so I thought I'd chip in. For reference, last year, I had the most accurate Western power rankings out of every creator, mainly because I was the only one who got the London Spitfire prediction correct. In fact, I made a small documentary on the Spitfire's uprise last year, so check that out on the top right. I will say that this tier list is going to be quite different to the other lists from different creators, and the reason being is that my strategy is going to be high risk, high reward for this year. In other words, I'm going to be banking off teams like the Justice to be the great underdogs, like Spitfire last year, whilst also preying on the downfall of teams like Boston, who have a criminal coaching staff. Also, these are predictions for how the teams are going to pan out the entire year, just like normal. Anyways, without further ado, starting off at number 20, we have the Chengdu Hunters. These guys don't even have a team and aren't even going to be able to participate at the start of the league. Who knows if they're going to be able to get their shit together as the year progresses. At 19, we have the Vegas Eternal. These guys might just be the worst Western team we've ever had in the Overwatch League. This team is straight trash. I don't even think these guys are going to win more than 3 maps throughout the entire year. The fact that they got bodied by a team cobbled together by a man-child in his mid-20s, and the fact that they got bodied by a contenders team who are supposed to be below them, and the fact they got bodied by the second worst Western team, the LA Valiants, there's really nothing much to say here. I actually don't know why Vegas just fired the entire roster and hired the roster from the Saints, because clearly, even though these guys on the Eternal have been playing together for a decent amount of time, they are still trash. I assume their contracts are year long and the org is just trying to save money, which, fair enough, I can't blame them. At number 18, we have the LA Valiants. Unlike Vegas, these guys actually seem to have some good parts to them, and seem to have a much higher potential. Seeker in particular is probably the star player that, as most would agree, would be the key part in winning some maps that these guys probably wouldn't be able to do so. At 17, we have the NYXL. Players like Shockwave, Fitz, Kellen, Lep, and Creative? Yeah, these guys do have the individual talents. However, these guys are a mixed roster, meaning communication is really going to be subpar, even with a translator. Again, in my London documentary, communication was probably a top 3 reason as to why they did so well last year. Also, I think these guys don't have a coach yet, though that might just be the Wikipedia telling me lies. At 16, I have the Guangzhou Charge. 5 players on this roster, all of a solid caliber. Choi Se-wan is one of the most underrated DPS players going into the season, and the Charge also have Chengdu's backline from last year. Really, it's the belief in whether Piggy has that flexibility to play tank to a high level that prevent the Charge from climbing any further up. I also just feel like this team hasn't got that punching power or volatility that other teams above them just have. At 15, I have the Vancouver Titans, a genuinely solid roster with Crimzo, who I rate very highly, alongside Sugarfree, who's been this prodigy for years, waiting for his turn to be on the big stage. Aspire was also the best player on the Titans last year, by far, and Punk is, well, Punk. I really wish these guys just had the coaching staff of something like the Spitfire, because Ascoft, I don't know who you are, but your Wikipedia is not looking saucy. I'm of course joking a bit there, because you can do literally nothing as a coach and get a first place position anyways, but we don't really know what his capabilities truly are. Hopefully they do have some kind of underdog story this year, because they do have that potential. At 14, and boy are people gonna cook me for this, I have the Seoul Dynasty. Yep, I can already see you typing furiously in the comment section down below, but hear me out. Yes, I know this team have Profits, but I don't think Profit has the motivation or drive to really do bits with this team this year. Coupled with a head coach who I think is a bit overrated, Void, who saw mixed results in Shanghai last year, and I wouldn't be shocked if these guys struggle. But, according to ATP, Lee Soo-min is very cracked, so we'll see how that'll turn out. At 13, I finally have the Shanghai Dragons. Yes, I know Fletter is on tank, and yes, I know DM is on support, and yes, I know Bebe is a washed play coach, but something about this team is telling me that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I staunchly trust Coach Moon, and that's maybe for the worst, but hey, we know how volatile APAC can be, and how predictions can get boomed, so hate on me in the comments as much as you want, because you're probably justified in doing so, but again, like I said at the start, my strategy for predictions this year is high risk, high rewards. Speaking of a high risk, high reward placement, at number 12, I have the Boston Uprising. Yeah, this team is crumbling internally, and who's surprised? Lee Jae-gon is apparently throwing in scrims versus the Valiants, and 4 different teams have commented on Boston's bad scrim etiquette, either leaving scrims early or taking long ass breaks. I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise considering Pre hired a literal criminal as New York's assistant coach, and players like Decay and Striker are known for their ego, but man, it's going to be a shock if these guys can get their shit together throughout the season. And number 11, I have the London Spitfire, the team that I predicted to do well last year when nobody else did. So what are my thoughts on them this season? Well, I think they're going to do worse. Not just because the competition in the West is so fierce, but because I think they're heading into this season worse off than last year, believe it or not. See, when I predicted the underdog story of the Spitfire, I had my reasons to do so, but this year, their coaching staff is weaker than last year due to the loss of Spylo, and are we just forgetting that Shax left the team in place with Lethal? Now, no disrespect to Lethal, but in the Pro-Am against the Florida Mayhem, he had one of the worst Tracer performances I think I've ever seen. Terrible cover usage, and as a result, mediocre blink management, and his mechanics in his tracking and trigger discipline were all over the place. Do I seriously think Christopher or Commander X can coach up Lethal to a top tier caliber Tracer? I don't think so, especially when you don't have Spylo, who's great at doing one-on-ones. London's best comp, being Reinhardt, is also not looking to be meta anytime soon, and has frankly never been meta in the history of Overwatch 2. And that's not saying that they can't play anything else, just that their ability to express their strengths might be a bit more limited this time round, especially considering Ramatra is in the game now. With that being said, I love London through and through, and they've always been a team where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But even I think the spot is pretty optimistic for this team this year. Breaking into the top 10, I have the Dallas Fuel. Yes, they do have a lot of raw talent in Sparkle, Hanbin and Edison, but the question to me is, how flexible is this roster? How comfortable is Hanbin on main tank if he's forced to play it in a Winston meta? How reliable is Edison as a hit scan pick? And we all know that Bliss and MCD are not as good as Chio and Fielder from last year. Really, the team lost a lot of punching power, and keep in mind, half the success of Dallas last year came down to Fearless and Winston in the playoffs, as well as Dallas getting very lucky with the Jungle Queen meta. And now, they have a weaker backline and a less flexible tank line. How are people still putting this team in their top 5? I do not know. At the 9th spot, I have the Soul Inferno. Yeah, top caliber team aside from Mag, who's in a similar situation to Piggy on the charge. Zest and MN3 are also slightly inconsistent, so there's that too, but the Inferno should really have no issue beating on teams below them for the most part. At the 8th spot, I have the Justice. A lot of people would understandably and reasonably put these guys a lot lower on this list, but I think this is going to be my London Spitfire type prediction for the season. I'm really not a big fan of FD Gold or Ben Best, or Flora even, but the biggest issue with this roster is that it's mixed. Really, it's my faith in Get Amazed that is putting the Justice this high, because I trust that Get Amazed can figure out the synergy and team play issues that the Justice have. At the 7th spot, I have the Toronto Defiance. It seems like the Defiance are going for a similar strategy to the Reign last year, where they just rely on a single DPS to do all the work. For the Reign, that was Kai, and for the Defiance, it seems to be Hydron. I think that the support line of the Defiance is a little shaky, and that the DPS lineup, whilst obviously talented, might just fall a bit short of the teams above them. Just missing out on the top 5, I have the Houston Outlaws. Shu, Fearless, Pelican, Happy, and Violet are a stacked team. It's whether throughout the season, Gargoyle can match the quality of Fearless and Winston, as well as whether the team synergy is going to be there or not when Gargoyle is being played. Again people, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. In 5th place, I have the LA Gladiators. They exceeded expectations in the Pro-Am, that's for sure, but I feel like these guys are teetering on the edge of being a top 5 team or dropping a few places down the list. The upper end of this list gets really difficult to judge because there's such a condensed amount of talent, but it's hard to complain about the DPS lineup of Kevster and Kai. Dante, I think, also has more flexibility than most people think, and whilst people may not be very warm about Babel, especially when compared to Shu on the Outlaws, I think he performed better than most were expecting in the Pro-Am. Now entering the top 4, I have the Florida Mayhem. I think the Pro-Am showed what the peak of the Florida Mayhem looks like, especially taking into account how favourable the meta was for them. Checkmate popped off, someone has insane flexibility, and Merit is a very reliable DPS player. Really, thanks to someone, as well as their broad DPS lineup, that keep them meta resistant as the season pans out. I doubt there's going to be fluctuating performances from this team. At 3rd place, I have the Hangzhou Spark. Yeah, this team's pretty stacked. Not really too many things to say about it. Maybe the tank spot might be an issue, and that's a fair concern, but that's a relatively minor issue, considering that you have the strongest DPS lineup in the whole of APAC. Zest and MN3 can compete, but that's when they're at their peaks. At second place, I have the Atlanta Reign. Yes, I know, they didn't perform amazing at the Pro-Am, but I do have faith that their team will figure it out as the season goes on. I don't think Gator is Coach of the Year material, but I do believe he's competent enough to put the right players in the right spots at the right time. And in first place, I have the San Francisco Shock. Yes, it's a bit of a normie take, but for good reason. The Shock came so close to winning last year, and that was with the Dallas Fuel at full capacity with everything on their side. Their loss at the Pro-Am can be chalked up to ping for at least a fair amount of it, and whilst I wasn't too impressed at Maximum Tank, I have a lot more faith in Coach Krusty solving problems than I do in Coach Gator. And that's it for my rankings. Shout out to my tier 1 Patreons, Remy Kane and Tyler Bishop. My Patreon will be linked down below for those interested. Let me know your thoughts down below, and until next time.